is the puppet master, and each one of those strings is different parts of what the mafia controls: politics, law enforcement, things of that nature. So that's very iconic and very symbolic to what the mafia does, and how each order is given out to each part of that string, of that whole set of strings there.
While Marlon Brando's considered the star of the film, like he won the award for Best Actor, like this is really the story of Michael Corleone, and it's really a story of him coming home as this American war hero and turning into the leader of the mafia, right? Because of various things that were out of his control. Like his brother, who was being set up for the leader, ends up dying. He ends up getting killed. And, you know, he never wanted a part of this business. And there's a big scene right at the beginning where he specifically states, that's my family, that's not me. You know, but he ends up being pulled into it, right? Which is going to lead to an awesome line in the masterpiece known as 3. Right, Zach?
Yeah, of course. Now, to that point, though, I think, you know, there are all these threads and all these family members, and beyond just, you know, what's going on. I think the reason that because you think, why do people say this is like the best film of all time? Why is it ranked so high? And I think because there's this vast family, I think everybody can relate to some branch of this family, some character, right, you can relate to, right? Michael's the outsider, you got the hothead, you got the older brother, the younger kind of goofy brother like Fredo, right? His introduction here is nothing. He's like, he wanders up to him, hey, I'm Fredo, and he's like kind of drunk or whatever. But that's a perfect introduction for his character, because he's just kind of a goofy, kind of foolish guy, and he has good heart, but he's just in over his head with all this stuff. And man, his all these characters, to see them in this first scene here and know where they all end up at the end is crazy. But I think literally that's why people keep coming back to it, because you can see no matter what kind of family you have or the people you know, like you can relate to all these dynamics going on, because there's enough dynamics going on here to relate to everybody.
And Brando even said, you know, during the film, he says to Michael, he says, I never wanted this for you. Sonny was the hothead. I don't know if he would have made a good boss. Fredo, not so much. And you kind of see that in the beginning and how it plays out, and then how Brando ties it up in the end, and how he always thought Michael would be the politician side, or the you know, not so much with the family kind of thing happening. But unfortunately, it falls on Michael's shoulders now, to the point where Brando gets put as consigliere, and counsels Michael as Michael comes in to be the new boss.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just want to interrupt here and let you guys know that it's completely unplanned, and it's a complete coincidence here, but I am eating my supper here while we're doing this podcast, and I just want to point out that my wife made gnocchi for supper tonight.
Nice.
I was wondering what you were eating.
Nice.
On brand.
I got a Tupperware of gavadils. I got a Tupperware of gavadils in the fridge I still got to eat.
It's kind of funny. One of the interesting character points that I find in this movie that I find extremely fascinating is the character of Robert Duvall's character. And you'll have to forgive me, Chris. I told you ahead of time. Chris is like, you got to write down the names, and I'm like, I'm never going to remember all these guys.
Tom Hagen.
So Tom Hagen.
The
only one in the family. Yeah, the only one in the family whose name doesn't end in a vowel. That's how you got to remember it.
Yes, excellent. But I find this character to be extremely fascinating because he was basically adopted off of the street by Vito Corleone, which to me seems really interesting because, you know, they're so strong on family that to have this person who's like not the family to be adopted into the family almost seems like something that would go against their own family code. But he's still respected enough and given enough authority that he is the right-hand man to the Don, you know?
The thing about Hagen, now Hagen was adopted by Corleone. We'll find out in 2, and I don't want to jump ahead, but we'll find out in 2 that Vito was shipped on the boat from Sicily to New York on his own. So he kind of has a soft spot for somebody like that, because Tom Hagen didn't have a mother or father. So they say, maybe the mother and father wasn't around enough. So maybe this is Vito Corleone reaching out with his heartstrings, saying to Tom Hagen, I was like you once, being out there on his own when he came off the boat.
That's actually a very good point, Chris, because as we'll mention again in the next episode, the backstory of Vito Corleone is actually in the novel The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they started to work on The Godfather 2, but they decided they wanted to continue on with the Michael Corleone plot as well. So all the Michael Corleone stuff in Godfather 2 is new, but all the past story is actually from the novel. So I wonder if that maybe would have been a bit more clear had that been, reading the novel, you might have made that connection a little bit more. But that's a very good point, Chris.
Thank you. I'm good for a podcast,
Zach, what do you think of Tom Hagen's character?
Yeah, again, Brett, I think, to your point, I think the juxtaposition of this guy is interesting because like you said, everybody's so family and traditions and who's older and younger brother, these kinds of things, and he's just this kind of wild card in there. Like, who is this guy? But because of that, I think he kind of has a quiet respect everybody gives him because he's kind of an outsider. But that speaks volumes for him as a person that he has been accepted into this community, being an outsider. So people would, give him even more respect than if he was just another Sicilian. Other than Sonny, because Sonny kind of laments that he's not a real wartime advisor later on in the film. But he says that out of anger, as he says a lot of things. But yeah, Tom Hagen, an interesting character, and I think of all the characters, he's kind of maybe, and maybe in the book they go into it more, but like he's kind of the least defined. Like he seems to be just the quiet guy who's like level-headed and gets stuff done. But you really don't know much. You know about his business, but you don't really know about his character. Like, I can tell you all about Michael and Sonny and Fredo and even Connie to a point. But Tom, he's kind of plays it close to the vest, but that's part of his character as well. So,
I think that's a defining trait of him because when he's having dinner with that movie producer, like that guy's like yelling at him and he's just calmly eating.
Yeah.
Right? And then the guy's like, he'll never work in this town. And he's like, okay, well, thanks for dinner. I got to go back because Vito Corleone likes to hear bad news right away.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is kind of fascinating because with the way the editing is done, it's almost like he set into motion the horse thing because it's like he lands in New York and then goes and tells him, but that stuff with the horse is already done, So
yeah, the guy made a big mistake. Hey, this is my favorite horse. Like, don't show these people things you value because it's going to come back to bite you in the end. So
excellent. So let's talk about that head. Let's talk about that horse head. So, how did that affect you guys the first time you saw the film? Chris?
I was young at the time when I first saw this, and I didn't actually know what it was. I had to wait till I was later on, and I watched it again, and then I figured out what it was. And of course, all my family was, they talked about it. It really didn't affect me at all. I didn't have nightmares over it, It was, I looked over in my bed, made sure nothing was underneath it from time to time, but all the same, it didn't really affect me emotionally nor mentally in that case. And I think that scene really was to send a message, and it absolutely did. It did its job pretty well. If I was Waltz, I would absolutely do what it was. Because you talk about Tom Hagen and how quiet and reserved he is. He never introduced himself as Corleone's consigliere. He just introduced himself and said, hey, Fontaine needs to be in this picture. Waltz turns around and says, you're just another nobody. I thought you were just a nobody like nobody else. Why didn't you tell me you were Corleone's consigliere? I would have done anything. And sometimes when you're in the mob like that, you really don't, again, you don't advertise it. It's normal. It's nonetheless, listen, I'm asking you a favor and just do this for me. I don't want to have to show my muscle or show my cards. But I'm asking you to do this for me as a favor. So
setting up this whole scenario, first of all, to answer your question, Brandon, I think I'd probably seen like a parody or two of this before I even saw The Godfather. Yeah. That's the danger of these things, like Planet of the Apes, all these iconic movies. Like, you have a danger of seeing parodies of them before you see the actual thing. So when it came time to actually see the movie when I was younger, I was like, oh, so that's where this is from. Okay, now I know. But talking about, as we're talking here, I'm thinking about like one of the most like, oh, jump out of your seat kind of moments more to me is earlier. Vito, he's been he's calm and collected, he's talking to everybody, right? But then when Johnny comes in and he starts crying, he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, you can act like a man. And I'm like, whoa, okay, it's like, oh, okay, he's got some fire in him too. He's not just going to sit here and let these guys whine and whine and whine. He wants people to take some responsibility for his own actions. He's still going to help him out because he is his godfather. But at the same time, he's like sick of his just whining and coming to him with all his problems every time he has an issue. But again, it goes back to that control, that quiet control that Vito has it, Hagen has it, Michael learns to have it. Sonny did not have it, and that's why he, as Vito says, he would not have been a good boss, not a good Don.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because you do have all the aspects of the family, all these different personalities that are in there, which does definitely make a good family, and it makes a family dynamic because everybody's different.
Talking about a shocking moment, though, I think I forget his name, but the big guy who Chris was reading his lines earlier.
Yeah, Luca Brasi, yeah.
Luca Brasi, right. So, in the movie, it's going for a good 30 minutes, and it's this mafia fight. They're talking about all these things, but, it's just a happy it's a wedding day, and everybody seems very nice and cordial and all getting along, right? But then, when Luca goes to kind of to act like he's going to betray the Corleones to get an inside job, and they choke him, and I'm like, whoa, this movie got visceral real fast. It takes you by surprise. Kind of have cordial and nice everything has been up to this point, but it shows you these other people are people to be feared, and that was like a shocking moment to me. It was like, whoa, okay, because everything had been just going along nice and easy, and that could have been a G-rated movie up to this point, and then bam, rated R right in the face. So a very, very effective way to introduce the brutality of the mafia. And what's to come later in the film there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also because they stab him in the hand, right? Like right in the top of the hand. That's what really throws you off right there. So
poor guy puts a bulletproof vest on and gets stabbed in the hand, and you'd think he would have at least some kind of glove or something. But going back to Brandon, what makes a good Don? I think all the aspects of all the characters, the sons. The underbosses make a good Don, and I think that's another representation of the marionette strings. Mm-hmm. It's each one of these aspects makes a good Don, and you have to figure out what string to play in this instrument that'll make things right. You want to be the tough guy? Do you want to be the laid-back guy? Do you want to be the guy who thinks before he acts? Do you want to surprise? Do you want a surprise attack? However you want to do it. And I think each one of these characteristics of each one of these characters played by Khan, Johnny Cavall, I believe his name is, and Pacino, all resonate within Marlon Brando's character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the things that you said there, He is a very good Don, but he isn't a good Don for these times because the times are changing, and they do a very good job of representing that in the film. And, Michael coming in, he's a very good Don to come in because he's younger, he's been through a war, so he knows a lot of these atrocities. And, you've got the scene with, I can't remember the mafia member's name that wants to start selling the drugs. Right?
Barzini? I believe it's Barzini.
He wants to sell the drugs, and, Corleone just politely refuses him. He says, look, best wishes, thank you for coming to me. I don't want to get involved because I think it's got too much heat on it. But you go ahead and do your own thing. And, as far as the story goes for the motivation of the character, he retaliates because he still wants he wants everybody involved, I guess, is what his motivation is that he wants all the 5 families of New York involved in these drug sales. And so it causes this war. People start getting killed, people start dying, family members start dying. Michael Corleone gets involved because his dad gets shot, and then he gets sent off to Italy, and we got this whole interesting subplot with him that we can't forget to talk about. Mm-hmm. But it's just interesting that and I realize this is a story that Puzo wrote, but they didn't want to let him not be involved, so this war started simply because Corleone was holding his values and said, I don't want to get involved in drugs. Just as long as we don't overlap, I don't have a problem.
Yeah, I think that's very smart that there's a real reason here. It's not just generic crime happening, because you ask someone, what's the plot of The Godfather? Well, it's this guy who doesn't want to be part of his family business, and he ends up being everything he swore he wouldn't be. But also, like, if you really want to talk about the story plot, it's about, the times are changing. The most powerful mafia family doesn't want to get into the drug deal with narcotics, and the other ones do, and that is what ignites everything. And it makes perfect sense in historical context because it is a period piece as well. So, because you forget all those reasons for all these. Oh yeah, Sonny gets killed and Michael does it. You forget all the reasons why this is happening.